The muzzle flash was brief, yet devastating. Not the thunderous roar of a German 88mm, but the sharp, rapid crack of an American 76mm cannon. Hauptmann Klaus Richter, commanding a Wehren Panther Ausf A, watched the round strike his frontal glacis plate, expecting the familiar, comforting metallic clang and deflection. But this was different. The impact tore through the steel, not cleanly, but with explosive, shocking force. In the span of 6 heartbeats, his superior machine was reduced to a burning tomb, and the unshakable German certainty in their heavy armor vanished forever. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to the Panther. For 3 years, the M4 Sherman had been the joke of the Western Front. It was nicknamed the Ronson because it lights every time, a cruel reference to its tendency to burn when hit. German superiority was absolute, rooted in the quality of the Tiger and the Panther. They relied on thick steel and terrifyingly powerful guns. The Americans, it seemed, had sacrificed protection and firepower for mere speed and quantity. Yet, in that single catastrophic moment, the penetration of the Panther's legendary armor, the Wehrmacht learned a horrifying truth. The Sherman was never the problem. The system surrounding the Sherman was the nightmare. The exact location of the shattering realization varied. It might have been the hellish hedgerows of Normandy, or perhaps the desperate counterattacks during the Ardennes offensive. But the collective moment arrived during the intense summer fighting of 1944. Germany, facing mounting losses and crippled supply lines, still maintained the arrogant belief that one Panther could take out 4 or 5 Shermans before succumbing. This narrative was vital for morale. But numbers, logistics, and terrifying advancements in American ammunition technology were about to combine into a fatal, unstoppable force, tearing that arrogance apart, one burning panzer at a time. Welcome to War Insight Stories, where we dissect the pivotal turning points of military conflict. Today, we explore the devastating irony of World War II, how the Allies' most criticized weapon became the primary architect of the Third Reich's downfall, forcing German commanders to abandon their faith in technical quality and face the overwhelming terror of attrition. We are going deep into the tactical errors, the design philosophies, and the psychological warfare that redefined tank combat forever. By 1944, the Western Allies were establishing their foothold. But the German military doctrine remained entrenched in the concept of qualitative superiority. Adolf Hitler, obsessed with wonder weapons, demanded tanks that were bigger, more armored, and possessed devastatingly powerful main guns. This led to the deployment of monsters like the 57-ton Panther and the 68-ton Tiger. These machines were engineering marvels, designed to win engagements on their own terms, relying on long-range duels where their armor could shrug off nearly any Allied shell. The initial encounters cemented this German belief. In 1943 and early 1944, a standard Sherman armed with the short-barreled 75mm gun often had to fire multiple times at a Panther's side, and sometimes even these rounds would harmlessly ricochet off the sloped armor. Frontally, the Sherman's 75mm was effectively useless against the German heavyweights, forcing crews to rely on risky flanking maneuvers or calling in artillery. The psychological dominance was palpable, leading German tankers to dismiss the M4 entirely, believing their technological edge was insurmountable. The American approach, however, was fundamentally different. The M4 Sherman was designed not by tactical purists obsessed with sheer firepower, but by pragmatists focused on reliability, maintainability, and, crucially, mass production. It had to be simple enough to be built by multiple manufacturers, quickly and in staggering numbers. The average Sherman could be repaired faster, driven further, and transported more easily than any German counterpart, prioritizing strategic mobility over absolute battlefield invincibility. This difference in design philosophy would become the strategic pivot point of the war. While German tanks often suffered from complex mechanical issues requiring specialist repair teams and factory-level intervention, the Sherman was built to be field-maintained by its own crew or divisional engineers. This reliability directly translated into availability. while a Panther might be technically superior if it spent 60. The true scale of Allied production became a psychological weapon. By 1944, the United States was producing tanks at a rate that dwarfed the Axis capabilities entirely. For every Tiger that rolled off the German assembly line, the Americans were fielding 10 Shermans. This wasn't merely a numerical advantage, it was an existential threat. German officers, hardened veterans, began to report less about the specific threat of the Sherman's gun and more about the crushing, overwhelming volume of armor pouring into the front lines. The constant, relentless presence of the enemy armor was a terror entirely divorced from individual quality. This quantity was the variable Germany failed to calculate correctly. They focused on tank-on-tank casualty ratios, aiming for a 5-to-1 kill ratio to make up the difference. But the war wasn't fought on spreadsheets, it was fought in combined arms operations. The Sherman wasn't designed to duel Tigers, it was designed to support infantry, suppress anti-tank guns, and keep moving. When a tank is part of a flexible, adaptable system backed by unlimited logistics, its individual weaknesses become negligible. This was the strategic context Germany ignored, believing their individual technical genius could defeat America's industrial might. Let's delve into the specific technical mismatch that required Allied innovation. The standard M4's 75mm gun lacked the muzzle velocity to reliably defeat the Panther's 80mm frontal armor or the Tiger's 100mm frontal plate, even at short range. A German tanker could often engage a Sherman from beyond the range where the Sherman could effectively reply. This forced tactical creativity on the Allied crews, necessitating maneuvers that exposed their thinner side and rear armor, often resulting in devastating losses early in the campaign. The response was not a complete redesign, which would have stalled production, but incremental, crucial upgrades. The British pioneered the Sherman Firefly, fitting the powerful 17-pounder anti-tank gun into the Sherman turret. This weapon was a direct counter to the Tiger, possessing superior penetration to the German 88mm. Although only 2,000 Fireflies were built, their presence was a vital psychological and tactical equalizer, forcing German crews to treat every Sherman as a potential threat, erasing the complacency they previously held. For the American forces, the primary solution was the introduction of the M4A3 with the longer 76mm high-velocity gun. While still unable to consistently penetrate the Panther's glacis frontally, it offered significantly improved performance over the older 75mm. However, even this upgrade was met with skepticism by some crews, who preferred the older gun's superior high-explosive capabilities for infantry support. The full potential of the 76mm gun would only be unlocked by a revolutionary change in ammunition technology, a secret weapon waiting to be deployed. Beyond the hardware, the intangible advantage lay in the American crews. While tank combat was inherently dangerous, American training regimens were rigorous, focusing heavily on crew coordination, quick target acquisition, and tactical flexibility. Crucially, the U.S. system prioritized rotating crews out of combat for rest and providing high-quality replacements. This ensured that American units maintained a high level of proficiency and morale throughout the campaign, even in the face of heavy casualties. Contrast this with the German experience. By 1944, German replacement quality was declining rapidly. Experienced crews were irreplaceable, and when lost, they were often replaced by poorly trained boys or older men with minimal operational experience, thrown into tanks suffering from mechanical fatigue. This degradation of crew quality meant that even the superb Panther and Tiger often operated below their maximum potential, making mistakes in positioning, maintenance awareness that the cohesive, well-supported American crews ruthlessly exploited. The critical tactical realization Germany overlooked was the Sherman's speed and maneuverability. In the dense hedgerows and rolling terrain of Europe, the heavy German tanks, designed for sweeping, long-range engagements on the Russian steppe, were often clumsy and exposed. The smaller, faster Sherman could utilize terrain folds and cover far more effectively, making them difficult targets for the slower traversing German turrets. This allowed the Shermans to close the distance, often negating the armor advantage and achieving flanking shots at the thinner side plates, where even the standard 75mm could be lethal. The true test began in July 1944 with Operation Cobra, the Allied breakout from the Normandy beachhead. This was the first time the Wehrmacht faced the full weight of the American mechanized doctrine. They were not just facing isolated tanks. They were facing entire combat commands, self-sufficient armored divisions, where tanks, armored infantry, artillery, and tactical air support worked in frightening unison. The Germans were used to fighting tanks. They were not prepared to fight an automated, industrial-scale hurricane of synchronized destruction. The German response was often based on outdated heroics, exemplified by figures like Michael Wittmann. While devastatingly effective in isolated actions like Villers Bocage, relying on single ace commanders in super-heavy tanks was a strategy built on fragility. The loss of one Tiger, or the breakdown of its complex engine, paralyzed an entire spearhead. The American doctrine, however, was resilient. Losing one Sherman meant the other 3 tanks in the platoon immediately adjusted, supported by fire from the flanks and overhead. The loss of a single component never halted the entire machine. German intelligence reports soon shifted their focus from praising the invincibility of their own tanks to warning commanders about the ruthlessness of the American combined arms strategy. They noted that American forces didn't simply use tanks to fight tanks. They used massive, instantaneous artillery bombardments, often coordinated in a time-on-target concentration, to suppress anti-tank infantry and German artillery, immediately followed by the advance of armor and infantry. If a Tiger survived the initial barrage, it was likely disabled by a P-47 Thunderbolt shortly thereafter. Air superiority was the Sherman's silent, massive multiplier. The powerful P-47 Thunderbolts, nicknamed Jug, were equipped to carry immense payloads, specializing in ground attack roles. They hunted German armor relentlessly, turning supply columns into smoking wrecks and forcing tank movements to occur almost exclusively under the cover of darkness. This constant aerial threat restricted German operational flexibility entirely, severely limiting their ability to concentrate their heavy armor for decisive counterattacks and allowing the Allied armor to advance unimpeded during daylight hours. The psychological drain on German tankers was immense. They were not only outgunned by the system, but they knew that even if they managed to destroy 3 Shermans, 4 more would immediately appear to take their place. There was no reprieve, no chance to rest or consolidate. One captured German commander lamented that fighting the Americans was like fighting the ocean. You might push back a wave, but the next wave was always bigger, always faster, always relentless. This psychological warfare, fueled by American production, began to break the morale of even the most hardened SS Panzer crews. While German heavy tanks were fearsome individually, their operational impact was geographically limited and tactically rigid. They dictated the pace of battle by forcing the Allies to stop and engage them. However, the sheer ubiquity of the Sherman forced Germany to spread its anti-tank resources thinly across the entire front. They couldn't concentrate their heavy tanks effectively because Allied armor appeared everywhere, pressuring every point simultaneously, turning local crises into strategic disasters for the Wehrmacht. The true moment of realization, the technical shock that sealed the fate of the qualitative argument, came with the widespread introduction of high-velocity armor-piercing, or HVAP, ammunition in late 1944. This specialized round, utilizing a tungsten core encapsulated in a lightweight casing, dramatically increased the muzzle velocity and penetration power of the 76mm gun. Suddenly, the seemingly inadequate Sherman gun was capable of penetrating the frontal plate of a Panther at standard combat ranges, a feat previously impossible. When German tank crews first encountered the HVAP rounds, sometimes called APCR, they were terrified. Their armor, their sole source of operational confidence, was suddenly unreliable. Reports from the Ardennes and the fighting in the Hürtgen Forest detail frantic communication between unit commanders expressing bewilderment and shock. The Americans have a new round. It's punching clean through the front of the Panther. This was not propaganda. It was immediate, visceral panic based on catastrophic losses in what should have been defensive strongholds. The introduction of HVAP leveled the playing field overnight. Previously, a German Panther commander could choose the range and angle of engagement, secure in the knowledge that 90% of Allied anti-tank fire would bounce. Post-HVAP, that statistical certainty evaporated. Every engagement became a risk. If the Sherman crew was well-trained and got the first shot off, even a German heavy tank could be knocked out. This forced German commanders to engage at even longer, more conservative ranges, further compromising their operational tempo and aggressiveness. This shift was perfectly illustrated by the deployment of the late-model M4A3E8, the Easy 8. This tank incorporated the improved 76mm HVAP capability, along with a redesigned horizontal volute spring suspension, or HVSS, which dramatically improved the Sherman's speed, stability, and off-road mobility. The Easy 8 was not only a lethal gun platform, but it was smooth, fast, and maintained the unparalleled reliability of its predecessors, representing the zenith of the Sherman's operational adaptability. The Germans recognized this fundamental difference. The Sherman was a platform designed for continuous, rapid evolution. Its simple, robust design allowed new engines, suspensions, guns, and ammunition types to be integrated quickly and seamlessly into the production line without massive retooling. The Tiger and Panther, on the other hand, were complex, optimized designs that resisted quick modification. Any improvement meant months of delay and massive factory overhauls, cementing the strategic irony that the simpler design was ultimately the more technologically advanced force.